My father denied me the family law firm because I'm a woman and gave it to my incompetent brother. I quit furious, built my own career. And months later, I sued them, humiliated my brother in court, and now my father is begging me to return as the true heir. I'm 26 years old. I'm a lawyer. I graduated from Harvard with honors, and about 6 months ago, my father told me I would never run the family firm because I'm a woman. Just like that. 30 years building that legal empire in Dallas. And it turns out the whole time I was working for nothing. Because in the end, it was going to my brother Michael, who can barely draft a contract without spelling errors. But anyway, let me start from the beginning because this story is more complicated than it seems. I grew up in one of those families where everything revolved around my father's work. Chen and Associates was like the sixth member of the family, always present in every conversation, every dinner, every damn moment of our lives. My father, David Chen, basically built that firm from scratch when he came to Dallas 30 years ago. He started with a borrowed desk and a phone and turned it into one of the most respected law firms in the state. I admired him so much. Honestly, I spent hours in his office when I was a kid, watching how he worked, listening to how he talked to clients, memorizing every case like it was an adventure story. My mother, Helen, was the complete opposite, like the perfect, silent wife who smiled at social events and never questioned anything. Sometimes I wondered if she had wanted to be something more, but I never dared to ask her. Michael is 3 years older than me, and honestly, he never gave a damn about law. When we were teenagers, he was more interested in his video games and his friends than anything related to the firm. Dad used to take both of us to the office on Saturdays, and while I read case files and asked questions about cases, Michael would fall asleep on the waiting room couch. But you know what? It never mattered. Because Michael was the male son, the natural heir in my father's mind. Even though he was a complete disaster, I got into Harvard on a full scholarship. Michael barely managed to graduate from a state university after changing majors 3 times. I did my internship at one of the most prestigious firms in Boston. Michael worked part-time at a firm belonging to a friend of Dad's who basically gave him the salary as a gift, but it still didn't matter. When I finished my master's degree and returned to Dallas about 4 years ago, I assumed I was finally going to take my place at Chen and Associates. Dad gave me an office. I started working on important cases. I won practically every trial I was assigned for 3 years straight. Clients specifically requested me. Other lawyers at the firm respected me. Even judges commented on my work. Michael also worked there, obviously, although most of the time he was in his office watching sports or leaving early for whatever. I worked until 10 at night, almost every day. Took cases that other lawyers didn't want to touch. Built relationships with important clients. I thought I was proving my worth, that I was securing my future at the firm. How naive I was. The bomb dropped on a Tuesday afternoon. My father summoned Michael and me to his office, and I thought it was going to be about the firm's expansion or some important new case. I sat there with my notebook, ready to take notes, and Dad started with his typical speech about family legacy and the importance of Chen and Associates. Then he said, "I've decided it's time to think about the firm's future, and I want to announce that Michael will be the next senior partner when I retire." I felt like someone had punched me in the stomach. I sat there, trying to process what I had just heard, while Michael smiled like an idiot and nodded as if he deserved it. I couldn't breathe properly, honestly. My chest felt tight and my hands were shaking. I asked him, "Why Michael?" And my father looked at me with that expression he always used when he didn't want to discuss something, like patient but firm, and said, "Michael is the oldest. He's the man of the family. It's the right thing." And there I was thinking, the right thing? The right thing for whom? I told him, "Dad, I have better credentials than Michael, more experience, better results. I've literally won twice as many cases as him in half the time. Clients specifically request me. I have a master's degree from Harvard. He barely passed the bar exam on the 3rd try. How can this be the right thing?" My father sighed as if I were a spoiled child who didn't understand how the world worked. He said, "Sophia, you're an excellent lawyer. Nobody denies that, but this is different. The firm needs a strong leader, someone clients see as an authority figure. Michael is my son. He'll carry the Chen name the right way. You're brilliant, but eventually you'll get married, have children, your priorities will change. I can't build the firm's future on that." He literally told me that, as if my gender were a factory defect that invalidated all my work, all my effort, everything I had achieved. Michael didn't even say anything, just sat there, enjoying his undeserved victory. I got up from that chair and told him, "This has nothing to do with leadership or authority. It has to do with me being a woman and you not being able to see past that. I've dedicated my entire life to being prepared to run this firm. I've sacrificed relationships, opportunities in other cities, everything, because I believed this was my future. And it turns out I never had a chance, right? It never mattered how hard I tried or how much I achieved, because I was born with the wrong gender." My father tried to interrupt me, but I kept talking. I told him, "Michael isn't qualified for this, and you know it. The firm is going to suffer under his direction. And when that happens, I hope you remember this conversation." I walked out of that office and went straight to my desk to pack my things. Obviously, my father followed me, trying to calm me down, saying I was being dramatic, that I didn't have to leave, that I would always have a place at the firm. But I had already made my decision, that moment of clarity where suddenly everything makes sense. I told him, "I'm not going to stay here watching you hand over my legacy to someone who doesn't deserve it just because he has a Y chromosome. I'm going to leave, and I'm going to prove exactly how much I'm worth. Without the Chen name, without your contacts, without anything. And when I succeed, and I will succeed, I want you to remember that you chose this." I packed everything that same afternoon. My diplomas, my books, my personal case files, everything. Some colleagues came over to ask me what was happening, and I just told them I had decided to look for new opportunities. I didn't want drama. I didn't want people to know that my own father had discarded me like that. My mother appeared at some point, with tears in her eyes, begging me not to leave, to think about the family. I told her, "Mom, and who thought about me? Who considered what I wanted, what I had worked for, what I deserved?" She just shook her head and left, because that's what she always did. Accept my father's decisions without ever questioning them. That night, I got to my apartment. I'd been living alone since I returned to Dallas. Thank God. And drank like half a bottle of wine crying on the couch. Not so much because of the betrayal, although that hurt a lot, but because of the realization that everything had been an illusion. All those times my father told me he was proud, all those moments in his office when I was a kid, all the apparent support for my education, everything had been a lie. Or no, not a lie exactly, but something worse. Like he was proud of me, but only to a certain point, only as far as the pride didn't interfere with his outdated ideas about who should run his precious firm. The next few days were weird. My father called me like 10 times, sent messages, even showed up at my apartment once, but I didn't want to talk to him. Michael also tried to contact me with a message that said something like, "Sorry you're upset, but I hope we can still be family," like the most condescending and stupid message in the world, as if I were having a tantrum and not responding to a real injustice. I didn't respond to him. My mother sent messages asking if I was eating well, if I needed anything, completely avoiding the real issue, as always. Meanwhile, I was sending my resume to all the important firms in Dallas. And here's the thing. My reputation preceded me. I had won important cases, had impeccable recommendations. My credentials spoke for themselves. In less than 2 weeks, I had 3 job offers, and one of them was from Foster & Marshall, one of the most respected firms in Texas. The senior partner, Daniel Foster, interviewed me personally. He was a man like in his 50s, with that calm energy of someone who's seen everything and doesn't need to prove anything anymore. He asked me directly why I had left Chen and Associates, and I decided to be honest. I told. In him, my father decided that my gender was more relevant than my capabilities, so I decided to look for a place where they value me for my work. Daniel looked at me for a long moment and then said, "Here we value merit above all else. Sophia, if you're as good as they say, and I believe you are, you're going to have all the opportunities you deserve." He offered me the job right there, with a better salary than I had at Chen and Associates, and the possibility of becoming a partner in less time than normal if I proved my worth. I accepted without thinking twice. It was exactly what I needed. A fresh start where nobody would judge me for my last name or my gender, only for my work. I started at Foster & Marshall about 3 weeks after resigning, and the difference was immediate. Daniel assigned me important cases from the beginning, included me in strategic meetings, introduced me to key clients. It was like breathing fresh air after years of holding my breath. My new colleagues treated me as an equal, not as the boss's daughter who was there through nepotism. Every victory was mine. Every success was the result of my work, not my father's connections. And honestly, it was liberating in a way I didn't know I needed. About 2 months after starting, Daniel called me to his office. He had that expression you make when you're about to propose something important, but you're not sure how the other person is going to react. He told me, "We have a new case, a client who's suing another firm for legal malpractice. It's complicated, it has a lot of visibility, and I need someone very good. Are you interested?" I said yes immediately. Obviously, those kinds of cases are gold for building a reputation. Then Daniel paused and added, "The firm we're suing is Chen and Associates." I don't know how to describe what I felt in that moment. It was like shock, adrenaline, fear, excitement, all mixed in 1 second. I asked him, "Are you sure you want me to handle this case?" And he said, "The client knows who you are. In fact, part of the reason they came to us is because they heard you had left Chen and Associates, and they wanted someone who knew how they worked from the inside. But you'll only do it if you feel comfortable with it. I'm not pressuring you, Sophia. It's your decision." I took 2 days to think about it. Literally 2 days, where I barely slept, turning the topic over in my head. On one hand, it was the perfect opportunity to prove my point, to show my father exactly what he had lost by discarding me. But on the other hand, it was my family, or what was left of it. Did I really want to cross that line? Did I really want to face them in court? I talked to some friends, a couple of mentors from Harvard. I even considered calling my mother, but decided not to. In the end, the decision was clearer than I thought. My father had chosen the firm over me, had chosen tradition over justice, had chosen Michael over my merits. Now I was going to choose my career, my principles, my future. I called Daniel and told him I accepted the case. The next 2 months were intense. I immersed myself in the file, like obsessed, studying every detail, every document, every communication between Chen and Associates and the plaintiff client. The case was solid. Honestly, the firm had made clear mistakes in handling an important corporate case. They had missed crucial deadlines, hadn't presented key evidence. Basically, they had been negligent in a way that cost the client like $2 million. And you know who had been the lead attorney on that case? Michael. Of course it had been Michael. The first hearing was surreal. I entered that courtroom where I had been hundreds of times before, but this time on the other side. My father was there, sitting at the defense table next to Michael and 2 other lawyers from his firm. When he saw me come in, his face was a mixture of shock, pain, and something that could have been pride but could also have been fury. Michael just stared at me open-mouthed, like he couldn't believe what he was seeing. I sat at my table, organized my documents, and waited for the session to begin. My heart was beating so hard I thought everyone was going to hear it. During that first hearing, I focused exclusively on the case. I presented our arguments clearly, answered the judge's questions precisely, objected to every weak argument from the defense team. And here's the thing. I knew exactly how Chen and Associates worked. I knew their strategies, their favorite tactics, the weaknesses in their way of preparing cases. I had grown up watching my father work. I had learned from him for years. Now I was using all that knowledge against him, and it worked. Every time the defense team tried something, I already knew what was coming and how to counter it. It was like playing chess against someone whose moves you already knew by heart. Michael was a disaster on the stand. We called him to testify about his handling of the original case, and it became clear in the first 5 minutes that he hadn't done his job properly. He didn't remember important dates, confused documents, gave evasive answers when asked about specific decisions. I pressed him with direct questions, citing his own emails and notes from the file, and he got more nervous with each question. At one point, he literally turned to my father looking for help, like a scared child, and my father could only look at him with this expression of disappointment that I knew very well, because I had seen it directed at me many times. The case lasted 4 sessions in total, distributed over about 6 weeks. Each session was the same, me presenting solid evidence of negligence, Michael and his team trying to defend themselves without much success. My father watching from his chair, unable to do anything. In the third session, the judge basically suggested to the defense team that they consider a settlement, because it was obvious where this was going. My father tried to talk to me during one of the recesses, but I just told him we couldn't discuss the case and walked away. Not to be cruel, but because I honestly didn't know what to tell him. That didn't involve screaming or crying or both. In the final settlement was generous for our client. Chen and Associates had to pay substantial compensation, publicly admit their error, and cover all legal costs. It was a total victory, the kind of result that builds reputations and leads to more important clients. When the settlement was signed, my father and Michael left the room without even looking at me. The rest of their legal team didn't say anything either. They just packed their things and left. My colleagues at Foster and Marshall were euphoric. Daniel congratulated me in front of everyone. The client was incredibly satisfied and was already recommending us to other acquaintances. It was the best moment of my career up to that point. But I also felt strangely empty. That night I stayed at the office until late, reviewing other cases, trying to keep busy so I wouldn't think too much about everything. Around 9, the receptionist told me someone was asking for me. It was my father. He was standing there at the entrance to my office, in that gray suit he always wore for courts, looking about 20 years older than 6 months ago. He asked if we could talk, and something in his voice made me say yes. He sat in front of my desk without saying anything for a long moment. Then he said, "I was wrong about you, Sophia. Completely. What I saw in that courtroom these last few weeks, the way you handled the case, your preparation, your strategy, everything was impeccable. You're a better lawyer than I was at your age, probably better than I am now. And I hurt you. I underestimated you. And I put my outdated ideas above your talent. There's no excuse for that." I never thought I'd hear him admit something like that. Honestly, my father wasn't the type to apologize or acknowledge mistakes, I told him. "And Michael?" And my father sighed in that heavy way that means he's tired of something. He said, "Michael isn't ready to run the firm." I knew it but didn't want to accept it. These months have been disastrous. Clients are complaining, other lawyers are frustrated, cases aren't being handled correctly. I've had to intervene in almost everything because he simply can't do it. And now, after this case, after everyone in Dallas saw how his own sister destroyed him in court, his credibility is on the floor. It was my fault. I gave him something he couldn't handle because I clung to a stupid tradition. Then my father looked at me directly and said, "I want you to come back, Sophia, not as a regular lawyer, but as my successor, as the next leader of Chen and Associates. I want you to take the place that should always have been yours." I literally felt the air leave my lungs. It was exactly what I had wanted for years, what I had worked so hard to deserve. But now, sitting in my new office, with my new life, with my new freedom, I wasn't sure it was what I wanted. I told him I needed time to think about it. My father nodded, gave me his personal number, as if I didn't already have it, and left. That night, I drove around Dallas for hours, trying to organize my thoughts. On one hand, there was Chen and Associates, the family legacy, the opportunity to run one of the most important firms in Texas, the validation that I had been right all along. But on the other hand, there was Foster and Marshall, where I had built something for myself, where they valued me without conditions, where I didn't carry the weight of family expectations or complicated dynamics. It's been about 3 weeks since that conversation. My father has called me 2 more times, asking if I've made a decision. My mother also contacted me, telling me that Dad is different, that he's reflecting a lot on his priorities, that the family needs me. Michael, surprisingly, sent me a long message admitting he was never prepared to run the firm, that he always knew I was a better lawyer, and that if I decide to come back, he'll support me completely. I don't know if I believe him, honestly, but at least it's something. Daniel told me that whatever decision I make, I have a place here, and that if I decide to leave, he'll understand completely. That makes things harder. Honestly, because it's not like I have to choose between a horrible place and a good one, but between 2 different opportunities that mean different things. Chen and Associates would be returning to my roots, taking what I always wanted, but it would also mean going back to that complicated family dynamic, working with my father and my brother, dealing with all those stories and those wounds. Foster and Marshall is my clean future, my own achievements, my complete independence. I still don't know what I'm going to decide. Part of me wants to go back and prove that I can take Chen and Associates to another level, that I can be a better leader than my father or my brother ever were. Another part of me wants to stay here, keep building my career on my own terms, without the Chen name defining who I am or what I can achieve. I guess there's no right answer, just different paths with different consequences. What I do know is this: I won. Not just the case against Chen and Associates, although that was important, but something bigger. I proved I was right, that my capabilities have nothing to do with my gender, that I can compete and win at the highest level of this profession. My father saw it, Michael saw it, all of Dallas saw it. And that validation, nobody can take it away from me no matter what I decide to do next. I took the worst thing that could happen to me, the deepest betrayal from my own family, and turned it into the catalyst to prove my worth. That's enough for now, I guess, while I decide what comes next.